KLK 2.5 FM, and we're back on Community Conversations. Join us in the studio now. We have Mr. Wally G. Vaughn. He is the editor of the book Blackville, Arkansas, Fashioned by a Former Slave. Stories from individuals who remember Blackville. And Blackville is a town, Mr. Vaughn told me when we were off the air, just a little bit south of Newport. So as we always say, it's always just amazing how much Black history is surrounding us that we don't even know about. So I want to welcome you to the program. We'll just kind of start with just kind of telling us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I am a native of Sumter, South Carolina, born and reared. After graduating from high school in 1972, my mother took me to Virginia Union University in August of the same year, where I matriculated and finished in 1976 with a degree in history education, then went on to the seminary at Virginia Union and finished in 1980. And in 1982, God saw fit to have me commissioned as a chaplain in the United States Air Force.
Thank you for your service.
Well, thank you very much. And I served in the United States Air Force as a chaplain for almost 30 years. During that time, I took another degree at Princeton Theological Seminary in New Jersey, and then on to United Theological Seminary in Dayton, Ohio. And since being out of the military, spent a lot of time just writing oral history. I'd been writing before coming out, but I always say to people and to preachers especially, have no congregational pulpit now, because God took me out of the pulpit and he has me doing this ministry, and this going about writing our history is the ministry for me now.
Okay, so you mentioned that this was sort of like an extension of your original calling.
Yes,
so
yes.
Basically, I'll talk about how that went from God telling you, okay, it's time to get out of the pulpit. I've got something else for you. So kind of talk a little bit about your journey into becoming a researcher and a writer.
Well, of course, my background is in history, and my initial degree is in history. But while I was on active duty, of course, you're stationed just all around the world, but several assignments in the United States. And one assignment was at Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama. And that was where the research actually began. I had a classmate down there. He was out of Virginia Union School of Theology there. But I had a professor who said, when you get to Montgomery, say you look up Richard Wills. Say he's at Dexter. And I went by Dexter and visited him. And, while there, I said to him one day, I'd like to just see some of the papers of the church of when Dr. King was here and see kind of how life was in the congregation and so forth. And he said, well, I'll make some inquiries. And about a week or so later, he called me and he said, Doc, you're not going to believe this. I said, what? He said, they don't have a thing here. I said, what? He said, no, there's nothing on record here. He said, the people just keep telling me we were here, he was here, and we just know what happened. I said, you need to tell the people we need to write what happened, because it's only a matter of time before all of those who knew him and were there with him, they will be gone too. And so that was how the writing of the history actually commenced. And that book was entitled Reflections on Our Pastor Martin Luther King Jr., the stories of people who were in Dexter Avenue Baptist Church when he was called to be the pastor.
Okay, so now let's get into the book, Blackville, Arkansas, Fashioned by a Former Slave. Stories from individuals who remember Blackville. So how did you get led to this project?
Well, God brought me to Arkansas in January 2016. Of course, you just follow the leading, not knowing you walk by faith. I came thinking, I was going to do some work in the Delta. I had that much of an assurance. But I was working out of Philander Smith college library because I had no place out of which to work at the time, and the librarian was kind enough to say, you can, sit here during the day and work and type. And a gentleman came through one day, and a lady introduced me to him. He was a 1977 graduate of Philander. His name was Willie Anderson. And we talked and discovered we were our fraternity brothers, both being alpha men. And when he
what's going on, 6?
Pardon?
So what's going on, 6?
Well, thank you.
For sure.
A good year.
Yeah, definitely a good year.
We'll talk more after the show.
Oh, for sure.
But anyway, Brother Anderson, when he found out I was writing oral history, he said, have you ever heard of Pickens Black? I said, no. Who was he? Brother Anderson said, well, he was the first black aviator in Arkansas. And I said, really? He said, yes. He used to, I was so intrigued at that point. I said, really? And he said he used to fly down to M&N and visit his son who was a student there. And after that, he would attend his fraternity meeting. Mr. Black was a Kappa. And he said then he would fly back to Blackville. And he said he was flying in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And I said, there was a black man in Arkansas, what we called back then a Negro, who had his own private jet in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. He said, yeah. And then he said, now that's the story you need to write. And I said, do you know anybody who may have known him or any descendants of sorts? Well, we weren't able to make the inroads immediately, but, over time, finally found someone. I think it took about 3 years before we made the initial contact. And thanks be unto God, it was his daughter that we found. And she has the first story in the book. But how it became Blackville, I was in search of writing the history and the story on the first black or first African-American aviator in Arkansas. But the trail kept taking me back to a place called Blackville. That was his home. And so Blackville just kept coming up. And then it just evolved, and it became apparent while I wanted to write about Mr. Pickens Black, the first African-American aviator, God had a larger story that was to be written. And the story to be written was about a place called Blackville where Mr. Pickens Black grew up.
Okay, and let's kind of get a little deeper into that because it says stories from individuals who remember Blackville. So it seems like that it started and then it just kind of took you in so many different directions.
That is correct.
So
yes.
let's kind of dive into that a little bit. What are some of the other things that of course, we can't give away everything because we want people to get the book, but just kind of tell a little bit more about what did you learn during the process. Can I just talk about the process of how the book came together itself, as far as the publishing and everything?
With the daughter of Mr. Black, the great beauty in her story, she always says, I've read things about my family over the years and said most of it was inaccurate. And she was delighted to help set the record straight in telling her story. She knew her grandfather, who had been the former slave in Alabama after the war ended. And he was probably in his late teenage years, it seems, or maybe early 20s. He came to Arkansas and settled in Jackson County. And up in that area at the time, it was, of course, just a bare wilderness out there where Blackville ended up being. And he bought 40 acres of land and probably had hired some men to help him cut the timber. He sold it, bought some more timber, sold it. And that process continued, and over a period of time, the former slave at his death in 1955 owned over 8,000 acres of land, which stretched 20 miles one way from Blackville to a place called Southland, Arkansas. When Mr. Black, the former slave, died, his assets totaled in the millions of dollars. But the beauty of it, what was just amazing about Blackville was that he also left a fleet of airplanes. Now, no one is aware that our people had a fleet of airplanes and much, much more up at Blackville in the 40s, 50s, and 60s.
Oh, absolutely, because I didn't know that. I know that when I went to the museum in Tulsa,
yes,
they talked about some of those businessmen there having airplanes, but to have that right here in Arkansas, that's fascinating.
Right down the road from you, yes.
All right, so absolutely. I mean, I'm definitely enjoying hearing you talk about your stories. We're talking with Wally G. Vaughn, editor of Blackville, Arkansas, Fashioned by a Former Slave, stories from individuals who remember Blackville. So kind of talk about, like, as you're compiling these stories, at what point did you decide we got to make this into a book, and what all did you have to do to get the book published?
Well, I would say after the first 3 or 4 stories, which were just all fascinating, it was obvious then, okay, this needs to be in print so people can read it. 2 of the children of the aviator have stories in there. And then there are, I don't know how many people, but who went to school in Blackville. Let me say, Blackville had 2 churches. An African Methodist Episcopal church, Maple Chapel. It had a Baptist church. They had their own school, Blackville Junior High School. They had a mercantile store. Of course, the landing strip out there for the airplanes. They had a meat packing house and so much more. So when all these things began to evolve and it became apparent just how much Blackville and that little community had, this needed to be told. And people who read the book, someone told me just about a week, a fella down in Florida, he's in Tampa. He called me. He said, I just got the book and started reading. He said, and I am so inspired. Everyone who has read this book or started reading the book, how can you not be inspired by a former slave at his death on a land that stretched 20 miles one way and leaving behind a fleet of airplanes, a school, and just on and on and on in his own community.
And of course, it's important that stories like this are told, because especially a lot of the youth don't know just how rich the history is.
Yes. And let me say, because, when I talk about Blackville, I do get excited. And when preachers get excited, they have to stand up. So I do need to just stand up and
So you can pull that up.
Well, thank you so much. Yeah. Now, let me say this to your listening audience. And those who are seated, hold on to your seats because you might fall down. Those who are
I think you're going to start preaching now.
The seat. Yeah, feel like I want to preach. But
you got 8 minutes
okay,
left. So
here's what. The aviator, he built his own first aircraft with his own hands.
Wow.
Yes, wow. Now I'll sit down now.
Okay.
He built his own first aircraft with his own hands, and that is documented. Up in Blackville, just the rural area there.
It just speaks to the genius and ingenuity that we have as black people.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
To think about this, and this was in what decade was this in? When like the 40s, you said?
Yes, in the 40s. He was flying in the 40s.
So think about that. In the 40s, not having the technology that we have today, able to build a plane and it flew. That is correct. And it flew safely.
Yes, and he was prohibited from flying out of Washington. Not because the plane couldn't fly, but I guess in part because he made it with his own hands. People ask me, well, how did he learn what? I have no idea. I always say to people, this man, if he was not a genius, he was just next to being a genius.
Well, God will just put something in you and you'll just know how to do it. And I use myself as an example. So I built out this entire studio and people say, well, how did you do that?
It is very nice.
It's just the gift that God just gave me. I just have always just sort of known when it comes to like audio and video, just how to put in computers, just put it all together. I never really took a class for hardly any of it.
Right.
So I would say that was the case with him. I think it was just something that was just put in him and he just knew what to do.
Yes, and that's a wonderful piece of the story. And again, Blackville just has so many wonderful pieces. Again, after just doing so many stories, it was apparent this needs to be a book. And I think there are close to 30 stories in the volume. And each person just tells his or her own story about their reflections and recollections of having grown up in what they call that wonderful place called Blackville.
I'm thumbing through the book, and by the way, definitely thank you for the copy. So one of the things that you can see if you get the book is you can see pictures of some of these structures that are still standing. Yes. And I'm just kind of glancing at them right now. Like I'm seeing I'll talk about one for a second. The Maple Chapel African American Episcopal Church, the home church of the black family.
That is correct.
Is the church still being used or just the building still standing?
Just the building.
Well, hopefully they can get that preserved, put that on the
Yes, Lord,
list
have
of historic
mercy.
places. So that's another treat that you will get up in the book as well. All right, so how can people get their hands on
They
it?
can order the work from Amazon or any online.
Book retailer?
Yes.
Is it only print, or is there a digital version available?
I think there is an audio above that. I'm unsure about anything else. And I
Well, in
think
fact, let me
there's
just look on
something
my
called
Amazon right
e-version.
quick,
Yes.
and I'll tell you right quick.
Thank you.
So while I looked it up, kind of tell me which one of the stories in the book was your favorite?
There are two, and it's difficult for me to narrow it down. The first would be by Pickens Buddy Black III. He was the son of the aviator and the grandson of the former slave. He has a powerful story. I always say Mr. Buddy Black saved the history of the family because he was the oldest living one at the time. He was in his 80s when he was interviewed. The second story comes from Mr. Alex Williams, Jr., who lives in Tulsa now. And I always say Alex saved Blackville because he tells more in his story about just that place and people than anyone else. They had a garage there, which men were hired just to take care of the machinery in Blackville that the black family had. When the former slave died, he left behind 40 tractors. You needed mechanics to take care of the tractors. They had like 100 teams of mules and horses. They had men out there whose only job they were hired to feed the animals. Just an amazing place. The aviator, when the father died, Mr. Black hired an accountant in Memphis. He moved the accountant from Memphis to Blackville to handle the books because the enterprise had grown so much and into the millions and millions, Mr. Black was unable to manage it. So he had to hire an accountant to come, and he built the accountant a house or a home in Blackville where he could stay and take care of the books for the black family and the economy there in Blackville.
So basically, you kind of just had a whole city just running and humming.
Yes, sir.
That's an amazing story. And I did look it up. It is available on Kindle, so you can go to Amazon or your local or online book retailer. It's available in print, digital, and audio. The name of the book is Blackville, Arkansas, Fashioned by a Former Slave, Stories from Individuals Who Remember Blackville. Willie G. Vaughn, who we definitely thank for joining us today, is the editor. Carolyn Ann Butley Cooley is the assistant editor. All right, got about 1 minute. Any final thoughts?
Well, it's just a wonderful book. I encourage people to read. If you're unable to purchase, encourage your library to purchase a copy and put on the shelf, and just go to your library and check it out and read. But it is amazing. It is an inspiring piece. I say to people, the Blackville story, for me, is the most wonderful story to emerge in Arkansas from the 20th century.
All right, and we want to thank you so much for joining us. And that's going to do it for this edition of Community Conversations. You guys have a great and blessed day. It's the KLEK on 2.5 FM. All right, get the stream.